Welcome, people of the internet. It's me again, Will, and I'd like to welcome you back to another case that I've been following. And this time we're going to the state of Ohio, here in the United States. Stark County, Ohio, to be exact. Because this doesn't take place in just one location. It doesn't take part, in just one city, but mainly in Stark County, Ohio. I want to tell you about a mother, but before I actually begin the story today, viewer discretion is strongly advised. It doesn't matter if you're someone who is a true hardened fan of true crime and it doesn't bother you, or if you're somebody who is new to the true crime community and following true crime. Please do not watch this. Some of the details in this case are horrific, and the punishment that this individual has received is basically amends to a slap on the wrist for what they have done. Okay, so we're in Stark County, Ohio. We're talking about a mother, Lillian Cottrell, 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 age 29, and what she was accused of and what she was actually found guilty of. It's unclear, according to the records that I've been able to obtain from DHS and that were part of the actual court transcripts, how many children she has. She may have at least 2 biological children, but in this household at the time of this, the horrific abuse took place, there may have been as many as 4 children, because her on-again, off-again boyfriend, husband slash fiance, Derek Mayle, M-A-Y-L-E, Mayle, has at least 3 other children from previous marriage, or relationships that may have resided in this home at the same time. So again, there may have been up to a maximum of 5 children who resided in the residency at some time or in some form. But we're looking at today about an unnamed child. Because of her age, they have not released her name. They have not released a lot of information about this child. But let's get into what she actually did. Lillian Cottrell horrifically, mentally, physically, abused this little girl, her own biological daughter, 7 years old. She admitted to terrorizing this little girl. She admitted to not feeding this girl on purpose as a form of punishment. And the worst part is, on top of everything else, on top of screaming at the child, verbally abusing this child for days and days on end, she locked her into a dog kennel with a padlock and refused to allow her to leave the kennel. At the time that this little 7-year-old girl was locked in this kennel, there was at least 1 child who was residing in the home full time, and at least 2 additional children who were residing in the home because of summer vacation. So all 3 of those children watched their sibling, or half-sister, whatever you want to call her, locked in a kennel for days on end because she had done something wrong. In one instance, Lillian admitted that all she did was, the little girl had taken a cookie that she wasn't, allowed to have. So she locked her in the dog kennel for 14 days. Only giving her water by throwing water on her and throwing table scraps, off of a plate, scraping them into the dog kennel so the child could eat. Ladies and gentlemen, at the time of the actual intervention, when the police came in to remove the children and this 7-year-old little girl, she weighed 28 pounds at the time that they actually rescued her. 28 pounds. She was emaciated, extremely dehydrated. There was almost nothing there. She was, and according to the medical report that I read from the transcript, she was no more than 2 weeks away from dying of starvation and malnutrition. On top of admitting to terrorizing the child, she admitted to not feeding the child. She admitted to mocking the child relentlessly every minute she was awake, walking past the cage and kicking it with her foot to terrorize the child, and whenever the child looked like she was about to fall asleep. So sleep depriving the child on top of it. Like I said, throwing water and scraps into the cage. And she did this all as a form of punishment. The other minor children who were in the home had received plenty of food. They were not malnourished. They weren't, dehydrated. But something, about what Lillian was doing, along with her on again, off again, boyfriend, husband, whatever, significant other, that it's hard to determine, when it comes to people like this. They call each other husband and wife, but yet they're not legally married. I cannot find any records in the state of Ohio that proves that either one of these two ever married the other one, or, even applied for a marriage license. But they call each other husband and wife. But they're on again, off again. Derek lived in the house and lived out of the house. But the entire time, Lillian was there, and he knew that she was torturing this little girl. He knew that his children were watching, the torture of this little girl being locked into a dog kennel with a master padlock. And during the actual plea agreement, Lillian Cottrell part of her agreement was that she was to admit to and tell the court in open court what she did. She couldn't put it in writing. She had to stand up and admit to what she did and tell in her own words what she had done. They almost threw out the plea agreement, of the sentence that they gave her, and I'll get to that in a minute. But they almost threw it out because she would not admit to everything that she had done. Oh, don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. Derek Mail is currently in jail and is awaiting the exact same charges. But at this time, they do not have a plea agreement in place for him. Lillian didn't blame Derek. Lillian didn't blame anybody. She never freely admitted that it was said that it was anybody else's fault for the abuse this little girl suffered, other than her own and at her hands. So Derek can come to court, and he can freely, try to blame Lillian for it all and try to strike a plea bargain. Now to the sentence. The sentence that Lillian Cottrell, age 29, received for the horrific mental, physical abuse of her own daughter, 7-year-old little girl. She was given a sentence of 3 years in prison. 3 years, ladies and gentlemen. And that will account for time served since she has been in county jail in lockup, awaiting this time. So because the delay of the actual court case because of COVID, and the court backlog because of COVID, she will be out of prison in probably a little over a year from now. All custody of the children has been stripped from both Derek and Lillian. They both voluntarily gave up their parental rights to the children. Now, there's no saying that, that they can't come back, and try to find the children later on in life. But at this time, they have, voluntarily surrendered the parental rights to all the children. Ladies and gentlemen, they didn't go into foster care. They didn't get adopted by an affluent family from the suburbs either. They got adopted, and the parental, figure in their lives right now is the grandmother. The grandmother who has had in her past a very checkered history with law enforcement. But they saw that, it was probably best to keep the children with a family member. Society has failed each and every one of these children, but particularly this 7-year-old little girl. Everybody is pointing fingers at somebody else, saying that it's their fault, that they should have known, they should have looked out for her. Everybody says that it's their fault or their fault. Now, I'm going to give you the same hypothetical situation that the prosecutor used in the actual case. Mother has a child. Mother raises child. Child goes to school. School gets out. The child is at home with the parent, but the parents must still work. You would assume that the parent will do everything in their power to make sure that the child has adequate food, shelter, and, someone to watch over the child while the parent works. A babysitter or a grandparent, somebody responsible enough to watch over the child. Without a prior CPS report, a prior police report of abuse or neglect, how is society supposed to look in and know what's going on inside of that home? There were signs that were there for those who were immediately connected to the family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and so on. But no one had any idea what was really happening inside that home until it was far, far too late. This little girl, again, was less than 2 weeks away. They figure by, medical records that were entered into as evidence in this case, 2 weeks away from death. She weighed 28 pounds, almost 29 pounds, at the time that she was rescued, at the age of 7. Malnourished, extremely dehydrated, but barely clinging to life, inside of a locked dog kennel. And the dog didn't even get to use their own kennel. They kept the dog chained to a tree outside instead, in the heat, in Ohio. Obviously, it doesn't get as hot there as it does in maybe Yuma, Arizona, but it was still horrific abuse. And each of the children who came in and out of that home, even if they were there temporary, all saw this little girl locked in the cage. So ask yourself, do you really know what's going on today with each of your grandchildren, your children, your children's friends? Again, without the police, without a proper CPS or anything else to go on, they can't just come knock on the door of every home from every child and look inside and say, is this child being taken care of? We let so many slip through the fingers of society. We could reach out and we could help so many. But yet, so many of them don't get help. Thank you for joining me today. Again, I'm sorry for bringing you such a depressing case. You have a terrific day today.